Hello, everyone. So welcome to this public presentation of the proposed changes to the planning program 525.3. These changes will be integrating the environmental protection measures into our urban planning tools in a multi-step process. And tonight, the presentation covers the first step, where we are essentially modifying the objectives of the planning program and defining the key orientations in this land use planning tool. Alone, this tool only sets the direction and the vision. The orientations must then be translated into finer planning tools that are used to assess if a project meets the standards and uses and criteria applicable to an area or to a type of construction. So that will be step number 2 of the process and will only be occurring much later in the year. Tonight's meeting and the written consultation period only apply to this first step, so the changes to the planning program. The written consultation is also a process that is applicable to this first step. And due to the COVID health restrictions, it is a written consultation that covers 15 days, which started on January 24th and will be ending on February 7th. The results of this consultation period will be integrated into the final revisions or proposed changes to the planning program that are scheduled to be adopted on February 24th. So as you know, the draft of these modifications to the bylaw were adopted on December 6th, and the final version, as I've just said, will be adopted on February 24th. There will be a question period after the presentation. The presentation will be carried by Etienne Lavoie, the director of our community planning department. And so I will cede the table to Etienne, and we can then hold a question period afterwards. So thank you. Etienne, je te passe donc la table. Il faut que tu te unmute.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous pouvez voir mon écran?
Parfait, oui, merci. On te voit.
Alors, tout d'abord, juste peut-être débuter par expliquer rapidement qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un plan d'urbanisme. Donc, le plan d'urbanisme, c'est le document de planification qui établit les lignes directrices de l'organisation spatiale de la ville et qui présente la vision d'ensemble de l'aménagement du territoire de la ville. C'est en fait le document le plus important de la ville en matière de planification de l'aménagement du territoire. Donc, ça établit les orientations qui vont guider la prise de décision en matière d'aménagement futur, ainsi que les stratégies qui vont être employées par le conseil municipal afin d'atteindre les orientations établies dans le plan d'urbanisme. Donc, c'est vraiment la base au niveau de la planification de l'aménagement du territoire pour une municipalité. Ensuite, du plan d'urbanisme découlent plusieurs règlements d'urbanisme dont les gens sont un peu plus familiers avec. Donc, par exemple, le règlement de zonage, le règlement de lotissement, les PIA, les règlements de construction, permis et certificats, etc. Donc, tous ces règlements d'urbanisme-là découlent du plan d'urbanisme et permettent donc de mettre en œuvre toutes les stratégies qui ont été fixées par le Conseil. Donc, first of all, a quick explanation of what is a planning program. So the planning program is the document which establishes the guidelines for the spatial and physical organization of the town while presenting an overall vision of the development of the territory. So it is the most important document for the town in terms of planning of its the development of its territory. The planning program establishes the orientation, the guidelines that will impact the decision-making of future development, as well as all the strategies to achieve these orientations. And then under the urban, the planning program, we have all the urban planning bylaws, which everyone is more familiar with, like zoning, subdivision, spate, etc. So these bylaws stem from the planning program and allow the implementation of the strategies that are planned to achieve the set orientations. So now that we've explained what is the planning program, on va maintenant regarder les objets de la modification du plan d'urbanisme qui a été proposé au mois de décembre, donc les principaux objets qui sont modifiés dans le plan d'urbanisme. Donc, d'abord, c'est de mettre à jour le portrait des milieux naturels qui sont présents sur le territoire de la ville. Le plan d'urbanisme a été adopté en 2009, donc ça fait maintenant de ça presque 12 ans, 13 ans. Donc, depuis l'adoption du plan d'urbanisme, il y a eu différentes études qui ont été faites par la municipalité, par la ville. Donc, en 2017, on a eu CIMA+, en 2019-2020, Eco2Urb, donc des différentes études au niveau de l'environnement qui ont permis d'améliorer, de parfaire la connaissance du territoire et des milieux naturels qui sont présents sur le territoire de la ville. Donc, c'est important à ce niveau-là de mettre à jour le portrait des milieux naturels qui sont présents sur le territoire de la ville. Ensuite, le deuxième objet de la modification proposée, c'est d'ajouter des orientations qui vont viser la protection et la mise en valeur du couvert forestier et des milieux naturels d'intérêt. Et finalement, c'est également d'élaborer des stratégies par lesquelles la ville arrivera à protéger et à mettre en valeur le couvert forestier et les milieux naturels. So now for the purpose of this draft bylaw. So first of all, the purpose of modifying the planning program is to update the portrait of the natural environments that are present on the territory of the town of Hudson. The planning program was adopted in 2009, and since then there has been new studies that were done by the town. So in 2017, the CIMA+ study, and in 2019-2020, the Eco2Urb study has updated and give more information on the natural environment present in Hudson. So it was important to update all this information in the planning program. And then secondly, the purpose is to add orientations for the protection and enhancement of forest cover in natural areas of interest. And finally, also to develop strategies through which the town will be able to protect and enhance the forest cover in natural areas of interest. Alors, si on rentre un petit peu plus en détail dans les nouvelles orientations qui sont proposées dans la modification pour la mise en valeur du couvert forestier et des milieux naturels. Donc, première, en fait, on vient modifier une orientation qui était déjà existante au plan d'urbanisme. Donc, originalement, l'orientation était de protéger le couvert forestier à l'intérieur des bois et corridors forestiers métropolitains. Et ce qui est proposé, c'est de toujours protéger le couvert forestier à l'intérieur des bois, corridors forestiers, mais ainsi que des secteurs qui sont établis et à développer selon les priorités de conservation qui ont été établies. Ensuite de ça, on propose d'ajouter deux nouvelles orientations. Donc, la première, c'est d'intégrer la protection et la mise en valeur des milieux naturels d'intérêt dans la planification et l'aménagement des nouveaux secteurs. Et deuxièmement, également, nouvelle orientation de préserver l'intégrité écologique des forêts. So now if we go in the details of the proposed modification, so there's the adding of new orientations. So the planning program in effect had an orientation that was to protect the forest cover within metropolitan forest and forest corridor. So in the proposed modification, we still protect the forest cover within woodland and metropolitan forest corridor, but we add that the protection is as well established and to be developed sectors according to the established conservation priorities. So we're extending the protection not only to woodland and more metropolitan forest corridor, but also in other sectors that are wooded. And there is also the proposal is to add 2 new orientations for the protection of natural environment. So the first one is to integrate the protection and enhancement of natural areas in the planning and development of new sectors. And the second new orientation is to preserve the ecological integrity of the forests. Alors, donc, une fois que, bon, il y a des nouvelles orientations qui sont établies, donc, ça prend maintenant des stratégies afin d'atteindre ces objectifs et ces orientations-là. Donc, il y aura la modification proposée ajoute 5 nouvelles stratégies pour permettre d'atteindre ces objectifs de protection et de mise en valeur du couvert forestier. Donc, on va passer ces 5 stratégies-là en détail. Donc, première stratégie, c'est l'élaboration d'un plan de conservation des milieux humides en s'inspirant au guide d'élaboration d'un plan de conservation des milieux humides du MELCC. Ensuite, deuxième stratégie, c'est de modifier les règlements de zonage afin de tenir en compte des priorités de conservation des milieux naturels qui ont été identifiés dans le rapport de Eco2Urb et qui sont dans les endroits qui sont susceptibles de faire l'objet d'un développement. So, after the new orientations, there is also new strategies. The town wants to develop strategies through which the town will be able to protect and enhance forest cover in natural areas of interest, specifically by planning. So the amendment proposed to add 5 new strategies, which will allow the town to achieve the objective of protection and enhancements of the forest cover in natural areas. So the new strategies are the development of a wetland conservation plan by referring to the Ministry of Environment guide d'élaboration d'un plan de conservation des milieux humides, and also to modify the zoning bylaw to take into consideration the conservation priorities and natural areas identified as likely to be developed in the Eco2Urb report. On va revenir en français. Donc, au niveau de la troisième nouvelle stratégie qui sera utilisée pour mettre en valeur le couvert forestier et les milieux naturels d'intérêt. Donc, c'est d'intégrer au règlement de zonage des dispositions visant à protéger les milieux humides. Donc, ces dispositions-là pourront, par exemple, limiter les interventions à l'intérieur des milieux humides, notamment en matière de remblais, de déblais et de coupe d'arbres. Favoriser la mise en valeur des milieux humides par des aménagements légers et limiter les interventions en bordure des milieux humides, de manière à favoriser une zone tampon étendue entre les constructions et les milieux humides. Ensuite, il y aura également limiter sévèrement les coupes d'arbres autorisées à l'intérieur de ces milieux, protéger les arbres durant les travaux de construction et les autres interventions autorisées, exiger une plantation minimale d'arbres lors du dépôt lors d'un projet de construction d'un bâtiment principal, favoriser le reboisement des espaces, le remplacement des arbres abattus et le maintien des arbres, et finalement favoriser le verdissement des espaces qui sont minéralisés, particulièrement les îlots de chaleur. So third new strategy that will be implemented is to incorporate wetland protection provisions into the zoning bylaw. to limit interventions in wetlands, particularly in terms of backfilling, excavation, and tree cutting. Promote wetland enhancement through light planning and limited intervention along wetlands to promote and extend extended buffer zone with buildings. Severely limit authorized tree cutting within these areas. Protect trees during construction work and other authorized interventions. Require a minimum planting of trees for a construction project of the main building. Promote the reforestation of natural areas, the replacement of felled trees, and the conservation of trees. And promote the greening of mineralized areas, particularly heat islands. Et bon, finalement, les deux dernières stratégies qui sont proposées, donc la quatrième, c'est de modifier le règlement de lotissement afin de régir les opérations cadastrales dans les milieux naturels identifiés dans le rapport Eco2Urb, qui sont susceptibles de faire l'objet d'un développement. Et finalement, cinquième stratégie, de prohiber la plantation d'espèces exotiques envahissantes sur le territoire de la municipalité. Par exemple, la berce du Caucase, le phragmite commun, le nerf brun bourdaine, etc. So the last two strategies that will be implemented, so number 4, to modify the subdivision bylaw in order to oversee cadastral operations in the identified natural areas likely to be developed. And finally, to prohibit exotic species planting on the municipal territory. For example, giant hogweed, European common reed, and glossy buckthorn. Donc, au niveau de l'échéancier du projet de règlement, il y a eu le 6 décembre l'adoption du projet de règlement. So December 6th, there was the adoption of the draft bylaw. Nous sommes présentement en période de consultation publique écrite. C'est une consultation publique de 15 jours, donc qui a débuté le 24 janvier et qui se poursuit jusqu'au 7 février, période dans laquelle les gens peuvent envoyer leurs commentaires en utilisant soit le formulaire qui est disponible sur le site Internet ou tous les détails de toute façon sont sur notre site Internet pour participer à cette consultation écrite-là. So there is at the moment a written public consultation of 15 days that started on January 24 and that is going on until February 7th. So people are invited to send their comments in writing by the easiest way is to go on the Town of Hudson website in the planning program modification section of the website and fill out the form. Donc, au niveau du plan d'urbanisme, la prochaine étape, le 24 février, sera l'adoption du règlement. Donc, suite à la fin de la consultation écrite, le conseil va lire tous les commentaires que les gens auront envoyés et le 24 février, donc, adoptera le règlement modifiant le plan d'urbanisme final en tenant compte, en considérant les commentaires qui auront été envoyés au conseil. Donc, le conseil pourra faire les ajustements requis ou qu'il aura jugé nécessaire suite à la période de consultation écrite. So on February 24th, Council, at the end of, after the 15-day written consultation period, on February 24th, Council will adopt the final bylaw amending the planning program. So Council will review all the comments and questions and will adopt the bylaw on February 24th. And then after, when the planning program comes into effect, the next step after that will be to adopt the concordance bylaws, i.e. zoning, subdivision, in order to be in conformity with the changes that were done in the planning program. Alors, la dernière étape qui vient après, en fait, l'adoption du plan de la modification au plan d'urbanisme sera d'adopter des règlements de concordance, que ce soit le zonage ou le lotissement, afin que la réglementation d'urbanisme soit en conformité avec les modifications qui ont été faites dans le plan d'urbanisme. Donc, comme je l'ai déjà expliqué un petit peu, nous sommes présentement en période de consultation écrite. Donc, les gens ont jusqu'au 7 février 2022 pour aller envoyer les commentaires et la Ville pourra par la suite modifier le projet de règlement en fonction des commentaires obtenus avant l'adoption qui est prévue le 24 février. Donc, tous les détails sont ici pour participer à la consultation écrite. So your opinion counts. Like I mentioned before, there's a public consultation that takes place from January 24 to February 7. So during this time, you're invited to send in your comments, and council will read all these comments. Et donc, après l'adoption du règlement, donc comme le plan d'urbanisme est un document de planification globale, les règlements d'urbanisme devront être modifiés afin de mettre en œuvre les stratégies qui ont été établies dans le plan d'urbanisme. Donc, la Ville travaillera sur des modifications à ces règlements de zonage et de lotissement pour établir des normes précises qui vont découler des nouvelles stratégies. Et c'est qu'une fois que les règlements de concordance adoptés et entrés en vigueur, c'est à ce moment-là, quand tout ça va être en vigueur, probablement vers l'automne 2022, que le contrôle intérimaire pourra être levé. Et à ce moment-là, ben, tous les travaux et les constructions devront être conformes aux nouveaux règlements d'urbanisme qui seront en vigueur à ce moment-là. So after the adoption of this bylaw, as the planning program is an overall planning document, the urban planning bylaws must be modified in order to implement the strategies that are established in the planning program. So following the adoption of the planning program, the town will work on amending the zoning and the subdivision bylaws in order to establish precise standards resulting from the new strategies in the planning program. So once the concordance bylaws have been adopted and entered into force, the interim control regulations will be lifted, and all the works and structures and constructions will then have to comply with the new urban planning bylaws in effect.
Merci beaucoup, Etienne. Very complete, very well done. A few rules for the question period. I will have Philip Toon is the black square on our screen admin. He will open, I guess, the mic for people one by one. I will call them out as I see your names show up on the participant lists. And just to let everyone know, we're up to 115 guests, so people in attendance plus us, so it's a total of 125. The first hand that I saw that came up, and I also want to remind people there's going to be a lot of questions, so let's try and keep them reasonably brief with one follow-up question if it's possible. And let's have a great conversation. So first person with a hands up was Maureen Slattery. If you would like to ask your question.
Sorry, I did not know I was putting up my hand.
Oh, that's all right. Did you have a question anyway, or would you like to lower your hand?
Not at the moment.
All right, excellent. Next person is Rob. Rob, you have...
Rob will not be able to participate for the moment. You're using a previous version of Zoom that's not compatible anymore. Please update, and then we can give you the floor. But until then, we'll have to pass to the next person.
So update and re-enter the room, Rob, and we'll keep an eye out for you. Next hand is Jim Duff. Jim, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. My first question is, this goes much further than eco-tour. It applies to the whole town. And at this point, I think most people are in the dark about how this bylaw, this mix is going to affect them. Why did you feel it necessary to go so much further than eco to urb in extending this to including to parts of town that are already zoned for development, have been zoned for development for decades?
I believe this only applies to the areas that are included in tiers 1 through 5 of the eco to urb. Etienne, can you nod if I'm correct? This only applies to the 37. So yes, Jim, this only applies to the 37%.
But the purple zones in your interactive map are not mentioned anywhere in eco to urb's report. Tier to 1 to 5, they're not. Most of those purple zones delineated in the interactive map are nowhere to be found on the eco to urb tiers. So where did those come from?
I believe that the purple, Jim, I believe that the purple is related to tiers 5. Mark, nod. Etienne, nod. Am I correct? The purple is tier 5. Jim.
But those were not in the eco to urb report. The tier 5s that are on the interactive map. That's what's confusing about this. It seems to have been extended much further than the eco to urb. Mark, have you read the eco to urb report? Do you know it? Have you read that report?
I read the report.
Yes.
Oh yes, multiple times.
In detail.
Oh yes, yeah, in great detail.
So you know what I'm saying when I say there's a lot of purple on the interactive map that never was shown on the eco to urb report and never characterized in the eco to urb report. So on whose authority was that done?
It's an exact reflection of what was in eco to urb as interactive map.
I mean, it's not in eco to urb. I challenge you to show me where it is in eco to urb.
Yeah, if you want, you could call me tomorrow and we could go over that. No problem.
I'm very, very curious about that. The other thing is, people won't know until whether they're going to be allowed to build until this fall. That includes not just phase 1 of Willowbrook, but some 10 lots in Hudson Valleys and Alstonvale. Oh no, that's just Hudson Valleys. Alstonvale is another story. So these people, none of these people are going to be taken out of limbo before this fall at the earliest?
So we will be adopting a first draft of the RCI number 2, which is a règlement de contrôle intérimaire, and there are provisions in that second freeze for some exclusions.
Okay, my last question is one of the characterizations in eco to urb was business as usual, and business as usual adds about 7% of Hudson's housing stock per year, which doesn't seem to me to be an excessive rate of development over the last 25 years. What's wrong with that rate of development in this council's, from this council's viewpoint? 7%.
Jim, there was never any problem with, keeping a low amount of redevelopment. I think what we're looking to stall and to slow down before we have better control is development in natural areas. There's plenty of area across the town. If we're only looking at 37%, there's all the other areas that are already urbanized that can be, as we've talked about, as infill development, and there's redevelopment. So this is not putting a full freeze across the town, and you know this.
Well, it remains to be seen. I hope you're right. Finally, why is this not subject to approval by referendum?
Because it is changes to the planning program that are related to environment protection. Etienne, you're allowed to nod or shake your head if I've got it wrong. Good, so I've got a nod. Jim, I'm going to pass to the next person if you don't mind. There are a few questions, but thank you very much for your implications. Thank you. Next person, Frank Nero.
Hi.
Hi.
Actually, Mr. Duff just told quite a few of my questions that I had.
That's okay. And if we didn't answer it sufficiently, please ask them again, right?
Thank you very much, Jim. So basically, I just wanted to say that I was one of the first landowner on Mayfair when Mayfair Street didn't even exist and it wasn't even connected to Ashtonville. I've been paying taxes over there for 20 years on 2 lots. Back in 2018, we decided to downsize, my wife and I, from St. Lazare, and we decided to move to to Hudson and to build a house. And we were fortunate enough to buy another lot next to the two that we had. For one day for my children to build their home coming. So my kids are now ready. They're married and they have children of their own. And like Jim said, this project has been developed over 20 years ago. The infrastructure is in place. People are paying taxes. I don't understand why the town of Hudson is trying to pass a bylaw to let newcomers and new homeowners build home in Hudson Valley and Ashtonville. It's beyond me. This I don't understand.
So the intention is not to keep people from building on their lots. The intention here is to strengthen the existing natural corridors that have started to be broken up by different developments. So it's really about controlling tree cutting and maintaining tree canopy as much as possible, and also maintaining our wetland and natural resources that are in place. The intent is not necessarily to not be welcoming to people who live here, but to live or to build in balance with nature. I think that, if you will attend the meeting on Monday, you will see that there's been quite a bit of effort put into that second freeze measure, the one that we'll be covering the next few months. And you will see that there's been quite a big effort actually to answer to those questions that have already come to us and the concerns of people such as yourself and other people with lots on streets and infrastructure.
Okay, so can I ask a question tonight and get an honest answer? Will council consider removing Hudson Valley and Ashtonville from the proposed bylaw?
It's not a blanket removal. I think we will have to look at that lot by lot by lot, but I think you will see that already there's permission, there's the intent or the provision that new constructions will be permitted on lots that are already subdivided. So again, I invite you to be present and to take a look also, because we will be putting online that draft bylaw. We will be announcing that there will be a public presentation for that freeze. And you can write that down already, which will be February 21st. So it's a Monday at 7:30 p.m. And it is really to present exactly what the exclusions to this freeze measure will be. So that should answer a lot of your questions that you have right now.
Thank you. You answered that like a true politician. Thank you so much.
Sorry, you're welcome. Adrian Burke.
Yeah, hi there. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, first of all, happy International Wetlands Day. Today is International Wetlands Day. For those of you listening, wetlands are the #1 top natural solution to carbon sequestration and carbon storage, much more efficient than anything any human has ever come up with and will come up with for the next 10 years. First of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate this public consultation process. I think it's about the 4th or 5th one that I've participated in since I moved here. I'd like to thank the councillors for their work, but especially the citizens that were part of the committee. I think they did a lot of work. I'm not sure how many hours they put in, but I think that I'm very happy that many people decided to put their shoulder to the wheel. I have just a quick question. It regards sort of like the baseline data. I'm a bit of a nerd about this stuff. I love maps and GIS, and when I look at the Technica, the CIMA Plus, and the Eco to Herb reports, there are differences in the mapping for sure. And I was just wondering if the plan is to use Eco to Herb as the sort of basic baseline data, and if so, going forward, is there a provision for us to add information to improve on that? I'm thinking, for example, of the very detailed biodiversity report that was done on Sandy Beach, which includes incredible data, 26 sites visits, 8 professors from McGill and other universities, biologists, entomologists. So I'm just wondering, is the baseline basically eco to herb? And then can that be improved on, or does the town have ways of sort of adding or paying for other studies, or?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. So on this point, we're stretching into that step 2, tonight still being about the step 1, which is really the general orientations. I would say that Echo to Herb really gave us the mainframe, showing us the potential of the corridors and connecting them and how much of them needed to be preserved and how wide we needed to go in order for that to become a sustainable corridor. From there, we do recognize that there's going to be more precise sources for delineation of wetlands, for example. We do have access to those layers already. And when you overlay all of those, I mean, obviously EcoTurb just gives us that extra buffer already. It's already drawn into there, but we have actually more accurate data. And then for the areas where we don't have accurate data, the intent is to ask for characterizations specific to what the needs are, which will be to make sure that there is, right now we're looking at the marge de non-déboisement or something like that. So to your answer, yes, we will be looking to different sources and not just EcoTurb.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next person is André. You have a question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So I was reading Eco to Herb report about 3 times, and I noticed that there is no mention, absolute no mention about risk of forest fires. And first I thought, well, maybe they forgot about it, and I read it again, and believe me, there is absolutely no mention. And it really does make sense not to be any mention about that, because all the measures that Eco to Herb report proposes actually increases the risk of forest fires. I could refer you to studies, and I could refer to technical terms as wildlife, urban interface areas, and all kinds of things like this. But let's just see common sense. If you're going to have, and let's just take one example, right? Let's take Hudson Valley, Austin Vale, which many people are concerned about. If you're going to have permanent conservation lots within already built lots, you're just going to increase the risk of fire. People are going to make barbecues, they're going to make campfires, and so forth. So it's just common sense to think that by introducing conservation areas within mature developments, you are going to increase the risk of fire. Let me go one step forward and say that this whole idea about creating the corridors is just going to intensify or increase the risk of fire, right? Because you are going to have more material to be burned. And it's not just that, it's the risk of pathogens. You should connect all these patches of forest. In the end, you're going to facilitate, transmission of insects, disease, and all that. So I'm not saying here that we should not protect, natural areas. All I'm saying is that for what you guys are trying to do, there are rules and regulations published by NRC. I think the last one is in July 2001, which clearly says that you have to have buffer zones. You have to have a certain clearage between human dwellings and forests. And actually there are numbers. I wrote my opinion in the formal process, and you have all the links. So my question to you is, are you going to implement whatever government of Canada via NRC recommends as buffer zones, or you are going to go and implement what Eco to Herb says from a very partisan perspective, I would say?
Thank you for your question. So obviously life and safety is extremely important. I will certainly take a look at your written comments and the links that you direct us to, and also consult the MRC, where I sit on a few of those committees, one being la sécurité incendie. So I certainly will be asking them what they feel about the different setbacks. I would think that human activity within a forest is probably more dangerous than just a forest standing on its own. I would think that people's houses is maybe more a cause of fire than actual, but I'm willing to look at your links. I think that that's an interesting avenue. I hadn't heard it before, but definitely it's part of the consultation. So.
My point is that this project does not address the risk of fire forest, not at all, zero, none. And I think you should take it in consideration because, you know, creating these areas and corridors specifically, it's a huge risk factor. And if I may, you know, just a follow-up question, I don't know how much you guys are politicians, so definitely you are aware of all this. So we have a lot of progressive political parties running US and Canada, right? If you look at $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that Biden actually legislated, it talks about elimination of exclusionary zoning. What does it mean? In very simple terms, municipalities that do not exclude, and I repeat, do not exclude bylaws with single home, you know, regulations are not going to receive federal money. As simple as that. If you look at what Justin Trudeau is saying, he's talking about inclusionary zoning. And let me just cite from his website, not his personal website, Liberal Party website. He says, federal government will work with municipalities to identify vacant or underused property that should be converted to housing on principles of use it or lose it. So I would say, you know, the housing crisis in Canada, it's pretty real. If everybody doubts about what government is willing to do, you know, for the public good after COVID, well, be my guest to guess. My point is that if Hudson would like to maintain the low density structure of the city, probably should think about how they approach development, because basically what Eco2Urb does inherently, it lowers the density of developed areas, right? So
I don't know about this, Andrea. I think that the idea here is that we maintain our natural areas, but that we densify elsewhere. We densify where there's already urbanization, where there is already development. So I agree with you. We should not be looking to have low density in areas that are green, for example. But I'm willing to look at your original question, which is, you know, the danger of having natural corridors for fire reasons. Maybe there's a point there. I hadn't heard that before, but I'm willing to look into that.
All I'm saying is, and sorry for taking much of your time, is that if you guys are going to designate as protected areas lots, let's say in Hudson Valley, the banks are going to call the loans just because the value of the asset is going to go to zero. There is just
Andre, I suggest that you take a look at the second freeze that will be coming into place and see whether you feel that we've gone far enough or not far enough, and perhaps we can continue that conversation then.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Sylvie Roson. Your turn, question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, good evening. My question is fairly basic. I'm a builder with a client who owns a lot on Mayfair, so it's a specific question. I did look through all the documents that were publicized. I did make some phone calls and send some emails to your staff in urbanism à la Ville. And so I'm going to go on in French. Oui, selon les documents que j'ai pu lire, il semble que ça manque de transparence. C'est quasi impossible de savoir par terrain comment ils sont affectés. Donc, exemple, c'est des niveaux de priorité de 1 à 5, mais c'est très peu clair ce que ça veut dire le 1 à 5. Alors, est-ce qu'un propriétaire de terrain qui est en priorité 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, comment on fait pour savoir si le terrain devient non construisible, si le plan de maison qui a été dessiné va rentrer à l'intérieur de la zone constructible? Il manque de transparence, il n'y a pas assez d'informations pour savoir, pour chacun des propriétaires de ces terrains-là qui sont déjà vendus, qui sont entre des mains de gens qui veulent bâtir leur demeure, leur hébergement, leur maison. on n'est pas capable de savoir qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, le niveau de priorité. Pouvez-vous éclaircir le niveau de priorité de 1 à 5? Comment c'est affecté selon le niveau?
C'est bon. Donc, merci pour votre question. Il y a deux items dans cette question. La première étant que nous en sommes seulement à l'étape 1 des 2 étapes que j'ai expliquées tantôt. Donc, on est à l'établissement des orientations et des stratégies justement pour l'intégration des notions d'environnement dans notre plan d'urbanisme. Donc, pour les précisions, c'est ce qui va s'en venir dans la prochaine étape qui commence en fait à partir du 24 février. Par rapport au niveau de priorité, ça c'était en fait l'analyse et la modélisation qui avait été faite par Eco2Urb. C'était pour donner une notion de si on y va avec rien que les Tiers 1 ou les priorités 1, voici le portrait. Si on rajoute la priorité 2, voici le portrait. Donc, en fait, pour nous, ces niveaux de priorité-là, on s'est rendu compte assez rapidement que ce qui était important, c'était de créer cette connectivité et de vraiment créer ces corridors-là. Pour le faire, il fallait en fait prendre l'ensemble des différentes priorités pour créer des zones. Donc, en fait, c'est une zone de conservation où, à l'intérieur de ça, on prévoit qu'il y aura éventuellement des exigences beaucoup plus fortes, par exemple, contre le déboisement. Par exemple. Donc, c'est plus les niveaux de priorité de Eco2Urb qui vont dicter comment votre terrain est construisible ou non. C'est vraiment la prochaine étape qui s'en vient. Et puis, comme je l'ai expliqué tantôt, c'est que nous allons avoir un projet de règlement qui sera déposé ce lundi qui s'en vient. Et là, vous allez voir donc ce qu'on propose pour le règlement de contrôle intérimaire et comment lui s'applique sur justement l'ensemble de ces priorités 1 à 5 qui maintenant seront considérées plus comme une zone de conservation.
Oui, d'accord, je comprends. Par contre, on fait une consultation publique, mais le public n'a pas toute l'information. Donc, il me semble que c'est un petit peu...
En fait, c'est parce que la consultation publique est par rapport au fait qu'on vient de vous expliquer qui sont voici nos orientations. Donc, c'est vraiment une vision, ce n'est pas du spécifique. Et voici les stratégies qu'on va utiliser. Donc, c'était vraiment dans le préambule, si on veut, de la présentation qu'Étienne nous a fait tantôt. C'est des visions écrites, ce n'est pas des visions en carte nécessairement.
OK, je comprends. Mais la deuxième question que je me dois de vous demander là, pour l'intérêt de chacun d'entre eux, mais spécifiquement pour mon client, dans la mesure où un terrain pourrait être catégorisé comme non construisible, ces gens-là ont acheté des terrains avec l'intention de bâtir une maison avec des règlements qui étaient déjà souscrits à leur offre d'achat. Est-ce que la Ville peut s'attendre, est-ce que la Ville s'attend à ce moment-là à avoir des recours légaux où ces clients-là, s'ils ont acheté un terrain puis qu'ils ont payé 200 000 ou 300 000 $ pour un terrain puis qu'ils ne peuvent pas bâtir dessus puis que ça n'a plus de valeur, est-ce que la révision...
Donc, jusqu'à présent, de ce que j'ai vu du travail à l'étape où il est rendu, je n'ai pas encore vu de terrain non construisible. Puis Étienne, tu as le droit de hocher ou de faire non de la tête, mais jusqu'à présent, j'en ai pas vu. C'est sûr qu'il va y avoir des restrictions quant au déboisement et à la quantité d'arbres, la coupe des arbres. Ça, c'est sûr et certain. On s'y attend. Mais autrement, de ce que je sache, les terrains qu'on a regardés jusqu'à présent, ils sont construisibles.
OK. Donc, en date du 24 février, on va être en mesure, chaque proprio va être en mesure de savoir comment son terrain est affecté. C'est ce que vous me dites?
Par le règlement de contrôle intérimaire.
Exact. Mais aucun permis de construction sera émis avant l'automne malgré ça.
Pas nécessairement. Si vous êtes exclu, en fait, il va y avoir des critères très, très précis qui vont dire dans cette zone de conservation, voici les critères qui s'appliquent.
Mm-hmm.
Ce n'est pas un gel total de construction.
OK. Alors, je me confirme là. Ça veut dire que si, exemple, certains terrains ne sont pas nécessairement affectés ou non construisibles, des permis de construction vont pouvoir être émis à partir de ce moment-là. Donc, au printemps, on pourrait s'imaginer que certains permis de construction pourraient être émis.
En autant que vous respectez les règles,
Les
le
règles qui-
règlement de contrôle intérimaire, puis encore, Étienne, tu as le droit de hocher ou de faire non de la tête, je te vois là. Oui, ça va? Oui? OK. Bon, j'ai pas dit de bêtises, donc oui, c'est bien ça.
Merci.
Merci.
Bon.
Anna Moscato, you were next.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, hi. I wanted to know, you had mentioned earlier that there would be certain exclusions. I wanted to know if Willowbrook Phase 1 would be one of them.
Willowbrook Phase 1 is an entity to itself. Most of the lots that have been sold, I would say all the lots that have been sold to date, their request for permits predate the original RCI. So they are still running off of the old bylaws. The issue there was more one of connectedness of hydro to the sewage pumping station, which now has been resolved since the beginning of this year, as of January 5th, I believe. And then there was a remaining difference of, I guess, of interpretation between the requirement for certificates of authorizations issued by the Ministry of Environment. And so there's been an exchange on that to date. Again, that's not an RCI issue, it's more a technical issue, and it is really in the hands now of our urban planning department.
Okay, so it wouldn't be part of the fall freeze, you're saying?
Not the lots that have been sold to date, which I'm counting 10 that I was aware of at least last week. I know that there's been new applications for construction to other lots that haven't been sold, and that's a different story. If they come in after December 6th, that's a different story. But for the lots that have been sold, their permits were submitted, or their requests for permits were submitted before September 6th.
So the ones that have been submitted
December 6th, sorry. Sorry.
So the ones that have been submitted after December 6th, what is the situation on that?
So those, again, it's part of those exclusions of that second freeze, which we will be issuing a draft of that bylaw, of adopting a draft of that bylaw on Monday, the 7th, and there will be a presentation on that draft bylaw on the 21st of February at 7:30 p.m.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Randy Pride, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Chloe. So I'm one of those that bought a lot on Mayfair in Hudson Valley. So would I be able to contact in the urban planning to find out if I'm going to be allowed to build?
So you have two people here on screen with us, but I would suggest that you wait until basically right now the freeze is across all of those zones, so tiers 1 through 5, and until we replace that freeze with the second freeze, which is the règlement de contrôle intérimaire. The first draft will be adopted on February 7th and will come into effect as of February 24th. So the question then, they're actually, they will be able to give you greater clarity on as of February 24th.
Okay, but is the goal for those lots that were already zoned for single family dwellings, is the goal only to have us respect the new norms, or will there be lots that will be actually excluded from being able to be constructed?
To date, I have not seen any lots that become unbuildable. It is more a question of the amount of trees and where the trees can be cut.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mark Smith.
Hi, I'm not sure if my question actually got answered by somebody else's question, but we bought a lot in Willowbrook. I guess we bought it in November, and the permits had gone in to build on that particular lot because we put a deposit down in October. So does that mean that there should be no issues with regards to the building after February 24th, after that resolution goes through?
So as I mentioned to someone else whose name I'm sorry I've forgotten, but as long as the permit request went in before December 6th, then the old bylaws apply. And there is no freeze that applies to your lot.
Thank you.
And the permits are going to be given.
My wife has a question too.
That's all right, go ahead.
Sorry. And the permits, when will they be issued? Will they be issued in a timely fashion after that
So
date?
that was the original answer that I gave to the person before you, which was that becomes a technical issue. And I leave that in the hands of the two people you see on our screen, Melissa Francis and Etienne Lavoie, for them to complete the analysis of those files. But in theory, as soon as those technical items are resolved, I would think that they can proceed.
Perfect. Thank you
Yes,
very
no?
much.
Do I say yes, no? Oui. Oui. Je pense que c'est oui. OK. Nadim Abi-Saleh.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I bought two lots, one on Mayfair and one on Cambridge, and both lots one is between a trail and the other one like between two houses. Having said that, I'm a contractor as well. Imagine your decision will go all the way till October. As you all know, we cannot build in the winter, and there is a major damage to my client, and the second land is my own property, my own building, my own house. There is a major damage. Did the city take in consideration? I love all to be ecologically correct, and I know nothing about it, so I trust you for it. But did you study the action and the reaction? Did the city take in consideration that Mrs. Silvici was saying $100,000 to $200,000? This is, you go to the dépanneur today, $200,000 to get yourself a Pepsi or a Coke. We're invested in millions of dollars. So having said that, did the city take in consideration that this damage on us, what's the solution?
Right, we did absolutely take that into consideration, and I think you will see that in the next step, which is again that règlement de contrôle intérimaire first draft will be adopted on Monday, with that presentation on February 21st and the adoption of it on February 24th. So as far as I've seen, there are no lots that are unbuildable. It is really a question of controlling where the trees and the quantity of trees that can be, well, the area of the trees that can be cut. So it's restricting, it's trying to maintain forest cover in order to continue with those corridors. The intent was not to stop construction or to stop, you know, we would like development to be better located, and also, and when we mean development, we mean more the higher density. In your case, that's the density that was planned and that has been built there for a long time. It's just to avoid the clear cutting of lots that has been going on in some instances, not necessarily all of them, but to be able to maintain some of those older trees. So I think you will be pleased with the efforts that have come into play. We certainly worked very hard at it, and I can tell you I'm very proud of the team at the town and how agile everybody has been in making this the most balanced solution for all.
One more quick question, please. According to the control of the tree cutting, I built 40 Vipon as well. And I thought that always existed. I mean, Etienne could second that. I did my best to cut the minimum trees. And there's a couple of trees also I had to save. I dug another hole and I saved them. And I thought that was always a law, no?
Some people are, you know, like you, more aware of keeping the trees, and other people will go to the extreme and cut as many trees as they can. I think that the tree bylaw has improved recently, Etienne, I think about a year ago or something like that. So you're probably thinking about before, but it's great. The fact that you're looking to keep as many trees as possible is a good sign, and possibly you will see very little impact on you.
That's why we buy in Hudson. We buy in Hudson for the trees. That was obviously was a bit of common sense.
Exactly. Thank you. That's
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you for taking my question.
Yeah, my pleasure. James McIntosh? You can unmute yourself, James.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
As everyone knows, we have beavers living in Jack Layton Park, and I think they're a tremendous asset to the town. And I would like to see provisions made by the town to ensure their safety and their longevity in Hudson.
Thank you. I would say that when they are building dams in a water course, it falls outside of our hands. It is really the regional board that has the mandate or the competency to come and restore flow as not to create flooding upstream. In the case of wetlands, it's a different situation. So in Sandy Beach area, it is at the arrival to the river. It's a little bit of a different situation there. Maybe better tolerated, but I understand. They can be nuisances, I'm told, but in our case, we seem to like their structure. So thank you. Was that it, James? Did you want, no? Gaetan Hull?
No, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Oui, Monsieur Hull, Gaetan Hull?
Oui, bonjour. Alors,
Comment
trois
allez-vous?
petites questions rapido.
Allez-y.
Alors, c'est certain qu'il y a des développeurs ou même des propriétaires qui étaient bien intentionnés lors de l'administration antérieure qui vont entamer des poursuites judiciaires contre Hudson, que ce soit parce que, bon, sont limités ou on leur interdit de développer, ou pour les délais occasionnés avec toutes les procédures que vous nous avez mentionnées. Alors, est-ce que vous avez un budget prévu pour les poursuites judiciaires? Et si vous en avez un, ça ressemble à quoi?
La question a été posée. Je n'ai pas fait mes recherches, malheureusement. Philip, I know you're on our screen. Do you have that number and can you unmute and perhaps give it to us?
C'est certain qu'on a les prévisions pour les frais judiciaires. De mémoire, le budget prévoit juste un petit peu inférieur à 300 000 $ en tout, et pas juste pour ce qu'on a devant nous. Pour ce qui est des poursuites, c'est certain que ça, c'est des questions qui sont posées à nos assurances. Mais la question, c'est vraiment qu'est-ce qui va être juste, puis qu'est-ce qui va être, comment que le processus va prendre sa suite. On verra. Je vous invite, M. Hull, de vraiment regarder attentivement ce qui va être déposé lundi prochain au 7 février.
Moi,
je pense que ça va vous intéresser.
Je ne suis pas impacté directement. Je suis à Hudsonville, j'ai construit, etc. Sauf que moi, je m'attends à ce que notre facture de taxes municipales augmente suite à toutes ces choses-là. Moi, je connais des familles là, qui ont vendu leur maison. OK, ils restent en appartement, s'attendant à ce que leur maison soit prête à déménager au mois de juin. Puis là, de ce qu'on parle, ça ne sera pas prêt avant la fin de l'automne 2022. Ces gens-là vont s'attendre à être compensés. Et avec juste raison. Alors, je voulais juste me dire ça. Je ne suis pas impacté directement, mais je pourrais l'être indirectement quand vous allez augmenter nos taxes. OK? Alors, vous devriez être complètement transparent envers les citoyens. Moi, je suis définitivement un écologiste. Je supporte les mouvements verts, mais je supporte aussi mon budget. Bon. Première question. Deuxième question, très rapido. C'est quoi le plan pour Sandy Beach? Ça, c'est un joyau à Hudson. On entend toutes sortes d'affaires. Puis moi, j'aimerais savoir clairement qu'est-ce qui va se passer. Est-ce qu'on va acheter le terrain? Est-ce que c'est quoi le plan? Là?
Une bonne question. Pour l'instant, on n'est vraiment pas rendu là. Puis ça, c'est vraiment de manière transparente. Présentement, c'était vraiment de mettre en place ces corridors écologiques. Je pense que c'était pas juste Sandy Beach. Il y avait d'autres terrains aussi de bonnes dimensions sur lesquels on se penche. Je pense que vous avez peut-être vu au travers de ma campagne électorale que en fait, ce que je tente de faire, c'est de redresser les devoirs que, à mon avis, nous n'aurions pas fait au début de l'implantation ou les mises en vigueur des des orientations du PEMAD. Pour moi, le PEMAD, comme vous le savez, c'est un plan métropolitain d'aménagement et de développement. Donc, il est basé, il est axé sur le transport, sur l'environnement et le développement. Puis, ma compréhension est que si on veut un équilibre, il faut d'abord préserver ce qui nous est important, le patrimoine, la nature, ces choses-là. Et ensuite, ça nous donne la résultante où on devrait densifier. À mon avis, on a manqué à la première étape. Donc, c'était ça mon intention, c'est de redresser cette situation-là et ensuite, on va aller voir comment on peut développer autrement ou mieux dans les autres zones. Donc, c'est sûr que les terrains dont vous parlez en premier lieu, ce sont des terrains qui sont déjà subdivisés. D'aller penser qu'un petit lot vacant ici, un petit lot vacant là va faire une grande différence. Non, pas nécessairement. Par contre, on veut, comme j'avais dit, répondu à quelqu'un tantôt, c'est que le clear cutting qu'on est habitué à faire, qui est devenu la norme, c'est sûr que c'est quand c'est sur des plus petits terrains, c'est difficile à éviter parce qu'il n'y a pas grand-chose qui reste une fois qu'on met la maison. Mais de garder juste un terrain vert pour l'effort de rajouter un terrain vert, ce n'est pas là qu'on va avoir la meilleure durabilité écologique. C'est vraiment dans ces corridors et de comment créer ces zones, donc créer des zones tampons et autres. Donc, on a vraiment regardé cette chose-là plus dans son ensemble. Par rapport à Sandy Beach, c'est sûr que c'est un endroit qui nous intéresse et en plus de ça, c'est une plage qui attire de plus en plus de gens de l'extérieur. Donc, il y a aussi cette volonté d'avoir un point d'attrait côté public. D'avoir un accès à l'eau qui est public et non juste des clubs ou par des propriétés privées. Mais franchement, on n'a même pas eu le temps. Ça fait 3 mois qu'on est en place. Moi, j'ai certaines idées. J'ai entendu d'autres conseillers qui ont d'autres idées. Philippe et moi, on a rencontré l'urbaniste et les promoteurs de Sandy Beach au tout début de mon terme, juste à leur dire, on est là parce qu'on veut travailler avec vous, mais pour l'instant, il faut que vous le sachiez qu'on a un conseil qui est très environnemental. Donc, on va commencer avec cette étape-là, puis après ça, on va voir exactement comment arriver à quelque chose qui fonctionne pour tout le monde. Donc, moi, c'est encore dans cette vision-là que j'aborde la chose. Je vous dirais que j'ai peut-être un peu plus d'intérêt à essayer de faire retirer le TOD qui nous donnera une meilleure flexibilité par rapport aux endroits où on est obligé ou aux endroits où on peut densifier. Donc ça, c'est dans toute la transparence, mais on parle on n'est pas encore rendu là. Ça, c'est une étape et peut-être dans 2 ans qu'on va se rendre là. Donc, j'espère que ça vous répond adéquatement.
Oui, dernière petite question. Il y a eu beaucoup d'abus. Moi, je demeure à Hudson. Beaucoup d'abus de coupe à blanc, comme vous l'avez mentionné. Alors, on se ramasse, puis il n'y a aucune intention de replanter des arbres. Il y a des terrains, on doit l'admettre, sont sur des terrains où il y a une dénivellation importante, on n'a pas le choix. À un moment donné, il faut couper des arbres pour mettre un endroit plat pour mettre les maisons. Est-ce qu'il y a des plans pour forcer les propriétaires à au moins replanter quelques arbres? Ça n'a aucun bon sens. Les coupes à blanc qui ont été faites, je sais que ce n'est pas ça qui va améliorer le canopé d'Hudson, mais tout au moins la beauté du paysage, on s'en va, là, puis c'est des coupes à blanc, là, puis il y a une maison sur un terrain d'1 acre, il n'y a aucun arbre. Je trouve ça complètement...
c'est désolant. Non, je suis bien d'accord avec vous.
Complètement désolant. Voilà.
Je sais que justement dans l'amélioration du règlement de zonage, je ne sais plus si c'était l'an dernier ou l'année d'avant, mais pour la coupe d'arbres, où il y a une prévision dans un des articles pour un remplacement d'arbres. Évidemment, ce n'est pas un arbre aussi mature que celui qui a été coupé. C'est une des questions justement sur laquelle on se penche, à savoir jusqu'à où on peut aller dans ce sens-là. Mais je pense que si on pouvait justement regarder le couvert forestier puis essayer de le maintenir à un certain pourcentage pour qu'il puisse agir à titre de bénéfices naturels qui nous donnent, que ce soit de la fraîcheur, qui viennent justement capter le carbone et toutes ces choses-là. Je pense qu'on s'en va dans cette direction-là. Comment on va y arriver exactement, ça reste à définir. Mais vous avez raison, c'est vraiment important qu'on fasse de la restauration également.
Merci beaucoup.
Bienvenue. Merci pour vos questions. Next is Russ on the list.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Terrific. Thank you very much for holding this session. I sincerely admire your strength and stamina in responding to all these questions. I'll try to keep on topic. I don't own a project or a lot on Mayfair or Austinvale. I'm just trying to clarify something from my understanding and hopefully for others. My current understanding is that the aim of this first phase of the bylaw is to protect tree cover in natural areas. My understanding again is what has been proposed is an overview, and the specifics, such as whether we should cut down all the trees to prevent forest fires, will come with the concordance later in the fall of 2022. My understanding from my limited reading and limited understanding of what I've read online is that in order to achieve the 30+% protection, areas 1 through 5 will need to be protected. So the question, I suppose, is based on that understanding, if it's correct, is it the intent to prevent development on areas 1 through 5 or limit density in these areas? Will the protection be achieved by requiring a percentage of trees remain on a lot, let's say per square foot? So that's question part 1A and B. And part 2 is much more simple. Will any development plans in forest areas be approved between February 24th and fall 2022?
I won't remember all of your questions, so I invite you to prompt me if I forget, but that's all right. So you mentioned tree coverage. It's also wetland protection. So it's those two things together, and it's really about the connectivity between the two and strengthening that connectivity. I think that there will be a lot of effort afterwards to sensitize owners as to, you know, already there is a protection buffer zone of 10 meters. So right now there is very little control over what is done and what isn't done, but to sensitize people to the value of those buffer zones and hopefully eventually encourage people to go beyond, right? Beyond the minimum and to understand the value of these buffer zones. With regards to what happens after the 24th of February, so that is really where this first freeze, which we have, gets refined, that actually opens up to some of the lots that we've already identified as being part of the corridor, but not necessarily, it's not necessary to avoid construction in those areas, but rather to keep the tree coverage and to keep the integrity of those forests when possible. So it's more in the type of buffer zone and the I think it's called buffers of non-tree cutting, if I remember correctly. So how we modulate that and how far we go with it, I see that this second freeze, sorry, is sort of a pilot project of sorts of seeing, you know, how far have we gone too far? Are we going far enough? And also to see the workability of it, because urban planning is going to have to go through the different criteria and assess whether it applies, doesn't apply. Do we have the amount of data that we need to support this? And also what is the buy-in from the public? So I think those are all, the fact that it's such a gradual transitional implementation of these, I think is very positive. And we remain committed, I think, to exchange with the public, to receive comments, to integrate them as best as we can into these more rigid tools that will come out in the fall. I know you had another question. Oh, development. Will development be allowed between the 24th and the fall? Is that what you mean?
So essentially, yeah. Will any new permits be granted between February 24th and fall 2022?
Right. So single
in the forest in areas 1 through 5 in particular.
So as long as the lot, right now what we're looking at is that as long as there is a lot that is already there and that it's serviced and it's on an existing road, public road, then yes. But again, I invite you to attend the meeting on the 7th, on Monday, and also to look at what we will be putting on the website and attend also the public presentation on the 21st, where more questions can be asked. I hope that answers all of your questions.
It does, to the best of my, thank you so much. I really
You're welcome.
I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your turn, Rob.
Can you hear me?
I can. How are you doing?
Hi, Chloe. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Thanks, everybody. Everyone's working overtime. Much appreciated. Just one comment. There are some municipalities that have laws that you have to have a certain amount of trees on your front lawn. So existing homes that have no trees, it could maybe be implemented one day that they have to have 1 or 2 specific trees. That would be amazing, but you don't have to answer on. That's not a question. That's just.
I think that's a great comment. I like it. I hadn't gotten that far.
Sure. I think Notre-Dame-du-Perrot, if you drive through that town, every single house has at least 1 tree, and they're beautiful trees. They're like the maples that go around, I don't know, maybe 10 meters high max, something like that.
Mhm.
Maple, beautiful.
I think if the setback is there, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, especially in Hudson, there's plenty of setbacks.
Mhm.
I think. Anyways, that was a comment, but my question is, Etienne, on maybe it's for Etienne or whoever can answer it. On page 11, in the 5 strategies, number 4, it says to modify the subdivision bylaw in order to oversee cadastral operations in the identified natural areas likely to be developed. I just don't know what it means. You got a clue? Anybody?
Étienne, veux-tu répondre, s'il te plaît?
I'm not trying to stump anyone. I just haven't got a clue.
You're
Well,
muted.
the identified areas that are that could be developed. There is a map that was prepared by EcoTour that identifies the areas that are susceptible to development. So this is what we are referring to.
Okay, Susie says that's clear.
Thank you.
So we're good. Thank you all again.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
Louise Craig, you're next.
Yes, hi, Chloe.
Hi.
I have a question either for you or for Etienne. I'm really confused still about the 5 tiers of eco to herb. I'd like to know how many of those are actually based on zoning as we have it in present time, and how many are actually zoned on the perception that some areas could actually be rezoned for development.
I think the 2 are separate, and I'll invite Etienne to correct me in a few seconds. One is really taking the forested corridors, the data that we have from the region, from the metropolitan area, the wetlands, the actual setbacks, the 10 meters that we have, and then areas of interest that have been identified throughout the town. So it has nothing to do with the zoning per se, if you mean the land use zoning.
The land use zoning, yes.
Yeah, so the land use zoning is more per lot and per property perimeter of properties, whereas the other one is really about where the trees and where the water flows, which is not cadastral.
But are we talking about areas which are under CPTAQ jurisdiction at this point, at one point being rezoned to white? I mean, are we looking at worst case scenario?
No, there's no rezoning agriculture to white.
No, I understand that, but are the tiers 1 to 5 inclusive of that scenario that would possibly be done, is what I'm asking. Is it based on worst case? Is this based on the informal meeting that was done, public information meeting that was done with residents of Hudson, where they base their opinion of what could possibly happen? Or is this based on sciences? Are we looking at opinion or are we looking at science?
It's all science, and that actually was one of the concerns as well of the conservation working group when they were looking and sifting, combing through all of that data. They anticipated that might be a pushback point, and I'm sorry for my cat.
I like the cat. I like the cat being there.
This is the worst time of the day for her. I'm sorry. So all this to say that was one of our concerns as well, and we actually had EcoTurb, now called Habitat, come and present to council and to the conservation working group and to the urban planners who are working with our urban planner divisions to explain to us, the recommendations that are in the report, but also to be able to pick their brain and say how much weight was put to that aspect of the public participation. And it's my understanding, and I'll invite anybody to nod or shake on the screen, but it's my understanding that one canceled out the other. There was sort of an orientation set by council versus what came out of those workshops that canceled one or the other. Mark, was that it? Was that the understanding?
Yeah, part of the criteria that they were talking about, particularly in tier 2, all the criteria that they were talking about were all important to the ecology of an area anyway. So carbon storage, connectivity, ecological integrity, and so on. Recreation was in there, so you may say recreation was a bit arbitrary, but they actually argue in Eco2Urb that recreation and people's interaction with these natural places is not frowned upon. It's important. I mean, it's important for us mentally and physically to be out in nature and to be attached to nature, but also the knowledge of how important the environment is around us, so we do preserve it.
Jim did an overlay, and of course, I mean, he knows Eco2Urb because he was one of the people who asked for it in the previous council and studied it. He also was a part of those public consultations, so he knows what was discussed during those. He did an overlay of both of these and says there is no way that Eco2Urb actually in their report put in all of those zones. Those were added afterwards. Under what authorization did you do that?
So it is my understanding that all of the colored zones that we have were the areas that we received, the data files that we received from Eco2Urb. So honestly, Louise, it's not me trying to be obtuse or non-transparent, but we will certainly look into that. That was the same question that Jim asked, and get clarity for you and ourselves on that. But it is our understanding that that's tier 5.
Yeah, because he says it affects a lot of more people than it did when he was on council with the report that they had in the tiers that were the areas that were actually earmarked for conservation and the issues that they were seeing with problems. I mean, now we're looking at people on Mount Pleasant, Birchill, Upper Whitlock. There's a lot of streets that were not part of areas that they were conserving at that point that are now impacted, and residents that are impacted.
Louise will ask, absolutely, but for now the tiers 1 through 5 are the ones that we understand we have, but we will confirm why there might have been a difference between what past council was working with versus what we are working with today.
Okay. Was council made aware of the appeals decision that came down for Saint-Hilaire in favor of the developer? This is the same law firm that Nicanco is using to counter what the town is doing right now.
I'm not aware. I don't know about the other members on council, but we were honestly not counting on that as part of our strategy. So it shouldn't affect us.
It does affect Hudson because a lot of the decision that was done, a lot of the issues that they bring up are very similar to what Hudson is doing right now. As last question regarding the referendum, I understand that because this is environmental, you do not have to do it, but council does have the opportunity if it wants to call for referendum. Will you do that?
I would leave that answer to council at this point. I don't feel that there has been a need identified around the council table, but if they choose, obviously I would support.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ken, you're next. Ken, you're muted. You're muted. Oh,
no, not now. Thank you very much for taking my question. It's actually a follow-up to one that Gaetan asked. If I understand Gaetan's question and your answer, there is a budget to pay back or to recompense people who have suffered financially because of the council's decisions since the beginning of December. I guess my question is, my first is that understanding correct? And second is, how do people that have been affected apply for this relief?
So this amount that was set aside, could you maybe mute or turn down the? Volume, I'm hearing an echo. I'm hearing. Ken, can you mute? Ken, can you mute?
Nope.
It's creating an echo. Oh, perfect. So that budget line item is really for all legal files across the town. It's not specific to the RCI or to any of the bylaw changes that are happening now. We did not necessarily set aside a special amount for this in terms of compensating people for any loss that has happened at this point. This is, again, a temporary measure. How that gets evaluated if it has to go to court is, you know, really up for the court to do so. Our effort was to impose this freeze during periods with little construction impact. We have worked very hard for this second freeze period to make it as flexible and as workable for people who had plans to build this year. So I do not anticipate that there will be a need for people to take it any further, as you will have the right to build. Again, where we move on from there and what specific areas, or if there's going to be some people who feel that they need to be better taken care of, we'll see as we go.
My sole point to that is that I am aware or have been made aware of people who have already incurred financial costs. So my question was, how do they get compensated for this? Not so much the future, but they already have incurred costs.
So the freeze was from December 6th till now. We are February 2nd. I do not think that what we've done to date has been the cause of their delay in construction. You're muted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yuri Rodrigue.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for all your time. And to everybody's surprise, I will actually not be talking about Hudson's Valleys and Austin Vale. A couple of questions regarding the maps, and I've done the best that I can to identify certain areas. And I'm just curious to understand why it seems that certain areas appear to have been left out. Maybe a little bit more specifically, a good part of the Fairhaven area, Woodcroft, and in particular, there's a property which is basically surrounded by the streets on Ridge, Hillside, Oakland, and St. Charles. And it is not identified in Eco to Urb as an area which would be potential for development, but I know for a fact that this property has been, you know, discussed for development over the last 15 years. Could anybody maybe see about that?
Certainly, we can look into it. I'm not familiar. I don't think I'm familiar. Are you talking about R55? Oui, c'est ça. Okay. I was trying to place all the names and I'm thinking, there's an intersection. So R55, well, there is a stream, or there is, you know, a water course of sorts that is running diagonally through that area.
Correct.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to show anywhere in the Eco to Urb either the susceptible for development, either the priority of conservation. Well, there's a little strip that's immediately in proximity to the stream as the priority for conservation, but there weren't even any samples or other than identified as water. There doesn't seem to be anything else identified there. So
what the tiers 1 did, which is that paler color, is that really is where the water courses are, and then it gives an extra 10-meter buffer, which is what is already prévu dans la loi. So it's just identifying that there's a water course there in that case. It doesn't need characterization.
Yeah, just wondering why in the three different maps here on Eco to Herb, it seems like certain areas have been clearly left out from their study. So just wondering if there's a reason for that. And then I would just have, if council and Mrs. Mayor would allow me, maybe a thought that I've actually been floating for the last probably 10 years regarding Sandy Beach.
Please, I'm very interested.
I'm all for actually, working with Sandy Beach. And what I mean by working with Sandy Beach is I understand the high value that it holds for the town of Hudson, and would like to see it actually utilized to its full benefit and potential for the residents to be able to enjoy such site. One thing that has often perplexed me is actually the difficulty to even access the site. There, you need to park at the community center. It's a rather long walk, not particularly conducive. I've done it with my kids when they were much younger, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, it was actually really unpleasant. Not why, I want to rephrase that, I apologize. If a thought had been given, maybe one thought that I often had was acquire the lot, which was slated for residential, for a single dwelling home, closest to the little path which connects the little circle at the end of Royal View with the beach area itself, where people tend to congregate, and utilize that as a parking area where people that have difficulty accessing the beach, or maybe residents of Hudson, and making it more conducive so that this area could be used for its beauty and its enjoyment, and that being in one part, and then in the other hand, to try to see how the town and its residents could be satisfied with the preservation of it, but at the same time consider how maybe this could be done in a joint manner where it's not going to cost the town potentially tens of millions of dollars and taxpayers additional money, but still preserve the areas of high interest and use part of those for future enjoyment.
I like where you're headed with this. Unfortunately, I believe that lot was recently sold, and I believe those people are looking to build soon. I know that Benoit and I were walking in that area around the election period, and we noticed the new owners there walking the land. So I like where you're headed with this, though, Yuri. And Peter just sent me a text and said, how about Yuri for TPAC? So I don't know, Yuri, if you're interested, there's a spot that's free on TPAC.
I'll take it under consideration.
Thank you. No, great question. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, everybody. Have a great night.
You're welcome. Britt Mack, you're next.
Yeah, obviously.
And I don't know if that's your name, but that's.
No, her name is Brittany McLean, and I'm obviously not Brittany McLean. So my name is Alessandro. I'm her fiance. We actually were the unlucky proprietors of Lot 18 in Willowbrook, the one that was deemed as unbuildable due to an archaeological build. So we had applied for our building permit in October, September of 2021. And then we were told in early December that we will not be able to build on Lot 18. So we were offered a different lot, Lot 21, in which case our building permit wasn't applied for until January. So in the 19th. So I know that we're not, within that first group of 9 families, but, we have been going through that process for about a year now. So we just wanted to know, what's going on with that. Would that be taken into consideration that we have been in the process for that long? Yeah.
Well, again, it's unfortunate for you, but great that you got a substitute lot. You will find with this draft of that second freeze bylaw, so the règlement de contrôle intérimaire, that there have been provisions for exclusions in there. And I would expect that should cover your lot. But again, we'll have to look at that in greater detail. And otherwise, I'll have to see with the team what is possible, but you make a good case.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Daniela Rodrigue.
Bonjour.
Ça va bien?
Ça va bien, vous-même?
Oui, merci.
J'avais beaucoup de choses à vous dire, mais je pense que vous avez déjà répondu à différentes choses, mais un peu d'une façon politique. Je voudrais juste mentionner, je suis promoteur des vallées d'Hudson. Il y a des ventes qui sont prêtes à être faites, mais qui sont retardées en attendant la décision de qu'est-ce que la ville va faire. J'ai des gens qui sont à l'extérieur de la ville, entre autres un client qui est en Espagne depuis 20 ans, originaire d'Hudson, qui prend sa retraite, qui veut revenir, et on doit terminer la transaction. Et naturellement, avec votre background, vous savez, il a engagé un architecte pour faire son plan. Et pour l'instant, on ne peut pas vraiment terminer la transaction. Et la période est très courte pour bâtir au Québec. Les gens qui ne sont pas dans le domaine ne le savent pas, mais maintenant, on doit réserver les fenêtres 6 mois d'avance. On doit réserver l'équipe de menuisiers 1 an d'avance, etc. Alors, le freeze que vous avez fait ne convient pas, mais pas du tout à la réalité économique que ça cause présentement. J'ai dû canceller un contrat que j'avais parce que le contrat présent ne peut pas aller de l'avant et ça me prend 10 mois, 1 an à faire une résidence. Je fais de la maison custom et j'ai dû canceller un contrat parce que le contrat que je devais débuter est retardé et ça me cause d'être obligé de canceller un contrat. J'ai des clients qui m'appellent qui ont fait des travaux avec des architectes, avec des technologues et que leur vie est sur une corde. Vous avez tenté de répondre à quelques clients qui ont posé des questions ce soir, mais j'aimerais savoir clairement, est-ce que vous bloquez ou non Hudson Valley pour les constructions? Que vous ayez des nouvelles règles de coupe d'arbres et tout ça, on n'a aucun problème avec ça. On n'a aucun problème à planter des arbres. Je trouve même désolant tout l'argent qui est dépensé présentement avec vos études. Si cet argent-là avait été utilisé pour planter des arbres, on aurait des milliers d'arbres à Hudson. Parce que qu'est-ce que vous faites? Ça coûte énormément d'argent.
Comme vous le savez, on ne peut pas, il est difficile d'encourager les gens à maintenir leurs arbres, à ne pas les couper, même si nous, on veut en planter des milliers. On peut les planter sur des terrains publics. Donc ici, c'est une question de mettre certaines règles en place pour que justement ces corridors forestiers ne s'arrêtent pas aux limites publiques, mais continuent. C'est un travail, on espère qu'on va pouvoir aussi sensibiliser la population pour nous aider à accomplir ces couverts forestiers et aussi le maintien des milieux humides et des bandes de protection. Donc, je vous entends clair et fort, comme je l'avais annoncé en décembre. Si on le fait à cette étape-ci, c'est vraiment pour minimiser l'impact sur le secteur de la construction. Je pense que vous allez voir justement avec le règlement qui se prépare que vous allez avoir une certaine flexibilité. À ce que je sache, comme je l'ai répété tantôt, il n'y a pas de lots qui sont rendus non constructibles. Oui, il y aura des restrictions quant à la coupe d'arbres. Ça, c'est sûr et certain. Mais ça ne devrait pas vous empêcher de construire dans les prochains mois.
D'accord. Alors, ce que j'aimerais, c'est une réponse claire parce que mes clients n'ont certainement pas aucun problème à planter des arbres. Ils viennent pour justement être dans un endroit qui est agréable, qui est boisé, etc. Quand on coupe les arbres parce qu'ils sont dangereux, et on a eu un bon exemple il y a à peine quelques semaines où il y a un arbre, un très bel arbre, qui a tombé sur l'entrée électrique et que les résidents ont été privés d'électricité pendant 2 jours. Et je pourrais l'envoyer à la municipalité si vous voulez, mais j'ai pris 2 jours pour prendre des photos parce que chaque fois, je voyais l'arbre qui était magnifique et quand on rencontre l'inspecteur pour faire attention à les arbres, on veut bien faire ça, mais par contre, cet arbre-là, quand on le voit, le centre était complètement pourri. Et croyez-moi, j'ai 30 photos. Je l'ai pris sur 2 jours, 3 jours, parce que chaque fois que je passais, je me disais, il faut que je prenne des photos. Alors, c'est pas qu'on veut préserver. Et de planter, c'est absolument pas un problème de planter des arbres. Ce que j'ai besoin, c'est d'une réponse claire. Est-ce que vous allez avoir des restrictions qu'on plante des arbres? Oui, on essaie de ne pas couper les arbres. Mes clients ne veulent pas couper les arbres, ils veulent couper ils veulent les garder. Mais j'ai besoin d'une réponse claire. Est-ce que vous allez lever la restriction? Le timing est incroyable, les délais sont super longs et ça cause un préjudice énorme. Madame, quand j'ai débuté le développement, je vais faire un recul en arrière. La ville de Hudson, à ce moment-là, les conseillers et le maire étaient quand même pas... ils faisaient attention. Les règles, à ce moment-là, je bâtissais à Saint-Lazare, les règles de développement étaient de 15 000 pieds carrés. Hudson a exigé 30 000 pieds carrés dans les vallées d'Hudson. Et Astonville, je dois dire, c'était un projet, comme vous savez. Alors, ils ont exigé 30 000 pieds. C'était le double de la superficie qui a été exigée. Non seulement que le double a été exigé, j'ai une section dans mon développement où je demande aux gens de faire des résidences plus grosses parce que je ne veux pas avoir des grosses résidences à côté des plus petites qui sont magnifiques, mais je voulais avoir une balance. Et j'ai, de mon propre gré, demandé et subdivisé ces terrains-là en 40 000 pieds. Alors, j'ai des terrains de 40 000 pieds qui sont bloqués maintenant par la ville, alors que ça aurait dû être 15 000 pieds. Et non seulement, lorsque j'ai eu le meeting avec le comité pour approuver le projet, j'ai demandé aux membres du comité, qu'est-ce que vous voulez? Dites-moi ce que vous voulez pour que ce projet-là aille de l'avant, pour qu'il sauve la ville, parce que la ville s'en allait en faillite. Et j'ai donné exactement ce qu'ils voulaient. Et vous savez quoi? Mon comptable m'a dit, tu vas faire faillite. Parce que c'est impossible avec toutes les demandes que tu dois rencontrer que tu vas passer en travers. 20 ans après, je passe en travers et vous me donnez un coup dans les jambes. C'est pas fair, c'est pas correct et c'est vraiment pas bien. Est-ce que c'est ça le 2021 avec la COVID? Alors, j'espère et j'aimerais avoir une réponse de vous clairement ce soir. Est-ce que Hudson Valley va être retiré de votre freeze? Oui, on n'a pas de problème avec les restrictions. Vous voulez qu'on plante des arbres? On va en planter des arbres, ce n'est pas un problème. J'ai planté 50, 75 arbres dans le développement sans que personne me le demande depuis que c'est ouvert. J'ai entretenu le parc que la ville n'a même pas 50 $ pour acheter une table et des bancs pour que les gens s'assoient dessus. Et on dépense des centaines de milliers de dollars avec des études maintenant. Les citoyens ne peuvent même pas s'asseoir dans le parc sur un banc. Est-ce que vous êtes au courant? Non. Parce qu'ils vont avoir des écharpes. Le banc qu'on a et la table de pique-nique qu'on a dans le parc, les gens ne peuvent pas s'asseoir dessus. Ils l'ont pris dans un bunker en quelque part qu'ils ont amené dans le parc. Alors, j'espère qu'on va trouver de l'argent pour pouvoir faire ça et j'aimerais avoir votre réponse. Est-ce que Hudson Valley va être sorti du ban?
Donc, pour les bancs, de ce que je sache, il y a peut-être une quarantaine de bancs qui sont restants des travaux de l'amélioration de Maine qui sont prévus en fait pour certains parcs et sentiers. Donc, on s'assurera d'en mettre au moins quelques-uns là. Pour votre prochaine question, en fait, les restrictions vont vous permettre, les restrictions dans cette zone-là de ce que j'en retiens, on ne va pas retirer comme tel Hudson Valley. Par contre, vous aurez l'opportunité de construire avec ces restrictions de coupe d'arbres. Donc, ça revient un peu au même, mais on n'enlève pas la restriction. Vous ne retournerez pas aux permissions qu'il y avait avant le 6 décembre. Vous allez avoir des restrictions qui sont un petit peu plus contraignantes par rapport à la couverture forestière. Mais je pense que ça devrait satisfaire à vos besoins. Donc, je vous invite évidemment, vu que c'est le projet de règlement qu'on adopte le 7 février, de nous revenir et de dire, d'accord, ça fonctionne, ou de nous dire, par contre, dans ce cas-ci, ça ne fonctionne pas, puis après ça, on reverra. En principe, nous, c'est le projet qu'on dépose le 7, puis ensuite, il y a la présentation qu'on va faire le 21 février. Vous pourrez poser d'autres questions si jamais vous avez besoin de plus de clarification, puis la version finale, c'est celle qu'on adopte à la rencontre, la séance spéciale du 24 février.
J'aurais une autre remarque, si c'est possible de vous faire. Mon fils a apporté une remarque à votre première réunion du mois de décembre sur l'estate Perrault. L'estate Perrault, comme vous savez, était une subdivision et j'ai construit une résidence là, il y a 15 ans où la ville a bloqué la vente d'un terrain que quelqu'un voulait acheter et voulait bâtir une résidence. Aujourd'hui, il y a une résidence qui se bâtit là, 15 ans plus tard. Et à ce moment-là, il y a 15 ans, Mme Hudson, j'ai rencontré un client qui voulait acheter le terrain, qui voulait bâtir une résidence. On parle de 10 000 $ de revenus par année de taxation pour la ville. 15 ans plus tard, la ville a perdu 150 000 $ de revenus parce que quelqu'un voulait sauver un gingerbread house, qu'après 5 ans, la ville est allée à la cour et la cour a dit à la ville, vous êtes mieux de laisser la bâtisse se faire démolir. Et c'est ce qu'ils ont fait. Est-ce qu'on se retrouve dans la même position? Est-ce que vous comprenez que le recul de 10, de 20, de 30, de 40 permis de construction, quelle somme astronomique que ça représente pour la ville de revenus perdus? Je ne pensais pas que la ville de Hudson était si riche. Lorsqu'on s'est fait frauder, la ville était presque absorbée par Vaudreuil, par la faillite.
Je pense que ça, c'est what I call myths that need debunking. Je pense que ça a pris certaines années pour clarifier justement combien d'argent manquait aux livres et tout. Mais de ce que je vois, la ville est quand même en santé financière acceptable. Ce qu'il manque, c'est plus du niveau de la gestion de nos actifs. Mais à dire jusque-là que la ville était très proche de la faillite et d'être absorbée par une ville voisine, je pense que c'est en mettre beaucoup plus que ce qui est raisonnable dans l'histoire des faits. Par rapport à la maison Perrault, je pense qu'on parle d'une maison patrimoniale sur une pointe d'eau, sur l'eau en fait. De ce que j'avais lu au règlement, c'était plus une question de procédure, peut-être qui avait été un petit peu bâclée, mais bref. Je pense qu'on en a tous appris de ce processus-là. Et puis, ce que vous trouvez bien et beau à Hudson, ce n'est pas nécessairement ce que le reste de la ville recherche aussi comme qualité de vie. C'est sûr qu'on veut une mixité. Je pense que vous apportez une belle qualité. Il y a des belles maisons, il y a des beaux secteurs, des beaux quartiers, mais à penser que c'est exactement ce qui devrait se passer sur l'ensemble du territoire, je pense que ça, c'est ouvert à la discussion. Donc, je pense qu'il faut qu'on apprenne à vivre ensemble. Il y a beaucoup de personnes qui comptent sur l'environnement, les zones naturelles, donc de laisser ça un petit peu plus à soi-même, de vivre parmi les insectes et parmi la faune et la flore et de voir ce milieu-là continuer de vivre bien. Je pense qu'on a justement cette richesse sur notre territoire et on veut la maintenir, cette diversité, et on veut la maintenir. Donc, je respecte que vous avez des investissements, que vous avez des projets. On veut absolument que vous soyez en mesure de les continuer, mais ensuite à dire qu'il n'y a pas de place pour une autre façon de vivre, une autre sensibilité, pour moi, c'est peut-être un peu démesuré. J'espère que je ne vous froisse pas en le disant comme ça, mais essayons de travailler main dans la main et d'accomplir justement une qualité de vie qui continue. Ce n'est pas juste une question de gain de taxes, parce qu'on sait très bien qu'à la longue, il y a des coûts d'infrastructures, d'entretien qui reviennent à la ville. On a des coûts présentement sur la gestion du drainage de surface, qui est résultant de développement qui peut-être aurait pu être planifié différemment. Donc, on en est là. On en est à faire un développement qui est plus intelligent, qui est plus responsable. Et les choses évoluent, les temps évoluent, les manières de construire évoluent. Et puis, on ne remblait plus tel qu'on remblayait il y a une vingtaine d'années. Donc, je suis contente de savoir, moi, je pense que j'étais sur le comité consultatif d'urbanisme quand votre projet de subdivision pour les maisons jumelées était rentré, puis j'avais trouvé ça intéressant comme projet. Donc, si je me souviens bien, ça avait été passé, toutes ces choses-là avaient été passées. Vous pourrez me corriger si je me trompe, là, mais je pense qu'on est ouvert à ce genre de choses. Vous l'aviez prouvé qu'il y avait une demande pour ce type de typologie de maison. Est-ce que c'est l'endroit à densifier? Espérons qu'on va devenir de plus en plus intelligent sur l'ensemble du territoire dans les années à venir.
Oui, non, ça va. Je me souviens que vous étiez là et puis que vous étiez positif et je vous remercie pour ça. C'est malheureux qu'on n'ait pas pu garder la population vieillissante qui était dans le secteur, qui voulait rester. Je pense que ce que j'offrais était bien, mais je ne retourne pas là. La page est tournée. Et comme je vous dis, j'ai absolument aucun problème à planter des arbres et mes clients n'ont aucun problème à faire ça. C'est juste qu'il y a vraiment des contraintes super importantes maintenant. La COVID n'a pas aidé. Et je regarde comme citoyen, et je ne parle pas ici comme développeur, je parle comme citoyen. Quand je parle de revenus, je suis un homme d'affaires et je compte. Et pour moi, le retard de X nombre de constructions représente des dollars que la ville de Hudson n'a pas à débourser. Les infrastructures sont là. J'ai bien compris, je veux dire, si je regarde l'item 4 de votre plan, les infrastructures sont là, les routes sont là, ils ont été faits il y a 20 ans. J'ai des subdivisions, ça fait 20 ans que je paye les taxes. Oui, vous allez laisser les constructions, mais il faudrait être clair, vous comprenez, il y a beaucoup de gens qui sont sur le sideline.
Je le sais, mais c'est vraiment... Ça, c'est le plan d'urbanisme. Hein. C'est là la distinction. C'est que ça, c'est les grandes orientations, mais vous allez voir assez rapidement comment on a commencé à les transcrire. Donc, vous devriez voir un allègement déjà qui vous permettra d'avancer. Puis donc, l'effet de gel, dans votre cas, aurait duré, je ne sais pas, décembre, janvier, février. Donc, presque 3 mois, mais pas tout à fait.
Non, ça va. Je comprends votre position. C'est que maintenant, il faut que ça soit réglé parce que la saison passe. Alors, merci beaucoup. Merci de votre effort.
Merci pour vos questions.
Bonne soirée.
Bonsoir. Murray, you are second to last. Your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. I just wondered, how does the town determine what a wetland is?
A good question. I am not the biologist on the team. I believe that there were several characterizations done since 2007. There's at least 3 instances, and also there are satellite imagery that come and place them, and these get confirmed on site. So over the years, we've acquired quite a knowledge of where these might be located. Of course, they move and they evolve. And these, of course, in the latest, the EcoTurb, they did some further field studies to confirm some areas and maybe find others. And that's my understanding of where those lines come from.
So do they take into account what the history is?
The history of the wetland and what its source is? Is that what you mean?
How it became?
How it became a wetland? No, I believe they just situate them and see them as bodies of water and wet.
So go out in your sock and step in the grass. If it's wet, it becomes wetland, right?
I believe it's more than that, but if you'd like, for you and me, it might be as basic as that. Yeah.
Well, I'm on Brisbane, and I live across from I don't know what you'd call it, the swamp, which is right beside the old nichoir.
Where the labyrinth is?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, when I bought the house 25 years ago, I got all the documents from way back when they started saving documents, back into, I guess, into the early 20s. That swamp was never there. It was somebody that if you walk through past the labyrinth into the next property, just behind, I guess, where the Nishore is right now, they had diverted the stream so that it came down to this area, so the farmers could water their livestock. So what got me was a couple of years ago, was before the COVID, we had a meeting at town hall because they decided to put in a buffer zone. And it was questioned that if the house burnt down, I wouldn't be able to rebuild. And that it only crossed my corner of my property by about 6 inches. And then it went over to Dawson Morrison side and traveled through the two properties. It didn't ever come back on my side. So if they hadn't have diverted the stream, it would have gone towards Maine and comes out just beside the cemetery. A couple of years ago, there was a fight between Leslie and Dawson and the lady that did divert the stream, that she decided, well, I'm going to put it back to where it was. And ever since then, the stream dries up every year, like bone dry. And over the last couple of years, the swamp is the same. And I was wondering, is that really a true wetland or not?
So I'm not familiar. I'm trying to see on the map where you might be situated. I know that area a little bit. I lived for a while at the back of the Pike Court area, and I remember that being very wet, but it always was very wet.
Yeah, you did some work for me way back when.
A deck, a terrace, right?
That's
You were on
correct.
Harwood, I remember you.
Very good.
So I think that area has always been wet, and that's a perfect
No,
example.
it hasn't. It was never there in the 30s. It wasn't until they decreed that she was whoever had that property could divert the stream for the farmers that are along that stream now, and I believe it flows into the Vivery Creek. I'm not sure. And
That's some 70 years ago, 80 years ago.
could have been.
At this point, it is a wetland, so it's
Oh.
considered a wetland.
Oh, okay. So
It would be hard to put it back because you're going to create impact on other lots that right now might not be considered wetlands. And then that's the whole point, is that if we want to have greater predictability of where all this wetness and this extra water is going, we need to start planning provisions for this water to go to, rather than continually shift it onto the lots of others and creating problems elsewhere. So it's important we give it its due space. I'm sure that doesn't help your question, Murray, but I appreciate the addition of that layer of history. I think that is an interesting one. We can see in some areas where there might have been, right, a continuation of a natural drainage pattern that had been deviated by human action. That happens in agricultural lands all the time. And the tendency or the strategy at this point is to put it back the way that it was, because there's much less resistance, much less sedimentation, and it's much better long-term. But sometimes there's constructions in the way, so we have to continue to do with this bifurcation or this realignment. Did you have a follow-up question, Marie? You're muted.
the unmute there.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You were talking about a 10-meter buffer. Is that around wetlands?
It's around wetlands and streams and water courses. Yeah.
Okay, because the meeting that we went to in the town was packed. They threw that out.
I think you're talking about 526.8 in what was that, 2019? Was that when it was? Yeah. And yes, that zoning change. So right now we're looking at the master plan changes, which is the orientations. So the next step will be to take it to zoning, to take it to the other laws. And at that point, the setback that was being proposed was a 30-meter setback, and there were no provisions for grandfathered in constructions and very little modulation as to what could be permitted within that 30-meter zone. So we've been working with that, and we do not want to repeat that sort of blanket application that obviously was too much too soon.
So if something does happen to the house, am I able to rebuild?
I'll have to go through that with the team, and if it burns down completely and has to be rebuilt, I believe so, because it's already urbanized. But we'll have to.
I would then be within the 30 meters.
No, because we won't be applying the 30 meters at this point. That's not where we're headed. Is your entire property covered by a wetland?
No.
No, just part of it?
Yep.
Again, I think that's something we'll have to look at it lot by lot with Etienne and Melissa. And I have a pretty good idea of where you live, but we'll have to get your address and take a closer look at it. But I like the question is a good one. What happens in the case of fire and having to replace more than 50% of its value, which is a measurement that we use.
I'm right at the speed bump as you come up the street. Darren knows where it is. So does Etienne.
It's great to hear your voice, Marie.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you guys doing this tonight.
That's great.
If I can add a little bit of information, I just had a look at your property. You're located approximately 26 meters from the nearest wetland, and there is a street that is between your house and the wetland that's on the other side of the road.
Correct.
So I don't foresee any problems in your property being able to rebuild in the case of a fire. And like Chloe mentioned, there will be provision. This council considers the existing constructions, the acquired rights, and their goal is not to create complications or problems for the existing house.
Yeah, well, I'm just getting old. I'll have to move out sooner or later. But does that the wetland only include the swamp area, or does it also include the stream?
It's all connected. If there's a stream in a wetland, then it is all connected. But the buffer would be at the edge or the perimeter of the wetland. Sometimes it includes the stream. Sometimes all of this is all makes only one big milieu hydrique or milieu humide.
Because the stream comes underneath the street and crosses my property. And I'm within the 30 meters last time I measured it when all this came about. Anyway, we'll talk later.
All right, that's great. So I see two hands that are still up. I suggest that we close the question period. Oh, one hand now. So after Mario Lencia, there will be no more questions. I invite you to send in your comments and questions in writing as part of the written consultation period. So to the last question, Mario Lencia, if you'd like to unmute.
Yes, hi, good evening. Curious about again the overlay of the tier coloring. I live at the end of Blankenship, at the north end of Blankenship, at the railroad track. If you
you're not far from where I live. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, my backyard is basically part of the Vivery stream there.
Mm-hmm.
That part it runs through my property.
Mm-hmm.
It runs under Blankenship, but I'm looking at the overlay of a tier 3 coloring, and my garage is in it.
So existing constructions will be grandfathered in. It's not an issue.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's all.
That's great. So thank you, everyone. This has been mostly very informative. I really appreciate everybody's attendance. And we look forward to seeing a lot of you. I'm sorry. Yeah, we've closed the question period. I see, Peter, you've put your hand back up, and I'll take you as the last one because I had seen you earlier and then it dropped. So we stop after Peter. So Peter, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The question I have, we have probably about 2 acres on our land that's considered a wetland on your map. It's not a wetland. It's wet in the spring for a bit, and when the people came by in 2017, it was not too long after the flood, so it was wet at that time. But it is a high and dry, mostly forest for from April till next spring, so it's certainly not a wetland. But my question is, what is the process for having reevaluated wetland or other tiers on the map?
I would suggest that if it creates a serious issue for you, would be to have it characterized and to bring that to the town so that they can adjust if need be. Maybe first make an appointment with either Melissa or Etienne just to confirm that, because they have a little more precise information with regards to wetlands, so that they can say to you whether it's worth you going through the hassle of getting that area characterized.
If we get it characterized, is that, I think I understand we have to hire a biologist to come in?
Correct.
And I've been led to believe it's only biologists that you guys approve. Can we use outside biologists that we've been potentially using?
Well, right now it's one of those conversations that we're having internally. We would like to control the quality of what comes to us. And so there's two ways of going about it. Either, it's the town that goes about it and charges it back, or we give a very clear list of what it is that we require, and that has to be a registered and certified biologist. We may opt to have a list of recommended biologists, but at this point, we're leaning towards a very clear list of requirements.
Okay, what other question? A big portion of the town's plan is to protect the tree cover. In the past year, we've had a lot of damage in town by Dutch bird with the ash borer and the gypsy moth in the past year. I think we look on our property of probably losing at least 50 ash trees this year. And if the gypsy moths come back as bad as they did last year, I think we at least 20 or 30 oak trees, some of them are 200 years old, we're going to lose. Is the town any plans to help landowners fight this?
So fighting a bug or a disease, I don't know how effective that is long-term.
Well, there are treatments. There are treatments for trees.
I know, but they end up being quite costly, and they're not necessarily a guarantee. Ideally, it would be replacement and diversifying of the types of trees. But I think that would be a mandate that I would give to the Permanent Environment Committee for them to make recommendations to us as to how to improve our bylaws and our programs, make some funds available to be able to plant back, because indeed our ash tree represents, I believe, 30% of our tree coverage at this point, and we've lost an awful lot of it already. We've lost a lot of the Dutch elms from 50 years ago and more. So absolutely, in my view, that is critical, something to focus on, but it's not part of what we've been looking at this moment. But thank you. It's a good comment.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you very much.
All right. So I'm sorry, Duncan Taylor, I had closed the question period just before you. Thank you. I do invite you to attend the meeting, the public meeting on February 7th, and bring more questions if you'd like. And again, reserve the date for February 21st, where we will be repeating this process without the written in consultation period, but to present essentially the second freeze period. So thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing a lot of you on Monday. Thank you. Merci, Etienne. Merci, Melissa. And thank you, Philip and Council.